Now a little bit of history as Lawrence brings this engine up is the Minneapolis Thrashing Machine Company actually has roots here in Wisconsin. It was started in Fond du Lac as the Fond du Lac Thrashing Machine Company, was purchased by Mr. McDonald, not the one who makes French fries, and he decided in the 1880s that Fond du Lac, Wisconsin was not the place to build thrashing machines and sell steam engines. So he moved it to Minneapolis, began calling it the Minneapolis Thrashing Machine Company, and they survived till 1928 when they were bought out and did a merger with the Moline Plow Works and Twin Cities Tractor Company and became Minneapolis Moline. This first engine coming is owned by Jared Rubel. This comes out of Forest City, Iowa. This was built in 1893 and is a 14-horse return flue. Minneapolis actually built as many return flue engines as they did direct flues. However, by 1908, they were done building return flues, built all direct flue engines. So there's not a lot of Minneapolis return flues left in existence and very few operating. This is the oldest operating Minneapolis return flue in the nation, in the world, that you're seeing right here today. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, after Lawrence goes through the parade with us, they're headed down to the sawmill and we will have this engine in the mill. So stop down and see an engine pre-1900s in the sawmill. The next engine is a 16-horse Minneapolis. This is the smallest direct flue engine Minneapolis built. This is owned by Dan Wyman and was built in 1917. This is another rare piece. This is one of 6 16-horse Minneapolis in the world. It's just a cute little engine. You can see this engine. We'll talk about some of the difference. This engine doesn't have a canopy. A lot of Minneapolises did have canopies. This one does not have a canopy on it. It does have the front water tank, something that's very trademarked for Minneapolis, is most of them came with a front water tank up in front. This engine came out of a complete restoration very recently, and Dan has had this engine. This is the 3rd state this engine's been in. His home state of Minnesota, it's been to Forest City, Iowa, and now Baraboo, Wisconsin, all in the last year. The next engine, this is a 1903 18-horse Minneapolis. This is one of the first direct flue engines built. It's a very early direct flue. You can tell by the round spoke wheels. Minneapolis went to the flat spoke wheels very soon after building engines. This is a double, so this is another one-of-a-kind engine, and this engine would have had twin stacks on it. Minneapolis tried putting twin smokestacks on to help out their engines. It was a failure. They were all sent back to the factory and converted to single stacks as you see here today. Next is a 20-horse Minneapolis. We talked about the earliest running engine. I can guarantee you this is the newest Minneapolis running because this is the last engine to leave the factory. This is engine number 8708 and it left the factory in 1924. It was the last one to be assembled on the assembly floor and shipped. So this afternoon that engine is going to be belted up with this 14 and we're going to be running the oldest Minneapolis in existence on the mill and the newest Minneapolis in existence on the mill. This is owned by Gary Henning and his family, and it's just another beautiful engine. As you look at some of the pinstriping on these engines, it varies. Through the research we've had done, we have a historian that's very knowledgeable in the Minneapolis Thrashing Machine Company. What they found is that there was an art museum not far from the factory, and they would hire artists to come down, students to come down and pinstripe their engines. So as we clean these up, you will find different pinstriping on engines because they were done by multiple people. Here we have another one-of-a-kind Minneapolis. This is a Minneapolis return flue, 22 horsepower compound. This engine was built in 1899. This engine has had a complete restoration. There's actually 2 engines in existence. Jeff Knudsen out of Fargo, North Dakota bought the 2 remaining engines and put this engine together. So this is a compound. We talked in the beginning of compound. So this has 2 cylinders on the opposite side of the parade route from where I am. You can see it's got 2 cylinders over there. A high pressure cylinder that the steam goes in first, and then a low pressure cylinder where it's used the second time to make it more efficient. Minneapolis built these return flues till 1908 and then they discontinued them. Most of the engines you will find in existence today are post-1916. There was some major changes Minneapolis did in 1916. There was some changes in the boiler laws, and when they changed their boiler design, they also changed their engine design. This engine here is a 24 horse. This is a 1921, and this is owned by Dale Knoll out of Bangor, Wisconsin. This engine has been in Dale's family for many years. Dale purchased this engine back. It had been sold off, and Dale purchased this engine back recently in the last several years and brought it back to the family. Some of the things we can see on these later engines, you can see the spark arrestor. When a steam engine's running, it will pull the fire out of the firebox and put it up the stack and start stuff on fire. If you're around here at night, we do that for fun and blow sparks in the air, but when you're out in the thrashing field and everything's flammable and you start it on fire, it isn't all that fun. So this has a factory spark arrestor on it. It has a front tank, also has a canopy. These canopies were built on the engines for a couple things. One, it gives the operators some shade when they're operating, and these engines sat out a lot of their life when they were out in the field, so it also helps protect the mechanical part of the engines. You can also see as this engine goes by, there's a big pot, we call it the bean pot, up in the middle, and that was for oiling gears. So when these engines went out and plowed and did field work, grading work, they would fill that up and then turn it on. This engine, if you look at it, has all the original piping on there for the valve oiling. This is another 24 horse Minneapolis. This one's owned by Gary Schott out of Stanley. This one was built in 1920. As you look at these engines, you can see the difference in pinstriping, difference in tank sizes. There was a lot of options you could get on steam engines in the day. This one also has an ejector on it, on the far side of the engine. And what the ejector did is when you were out in the field and you needed to pull water out of a stream, you could turn that on. It would actually suck water out of the stream through a hose and put it into your water tank. So you could fill those tanks when you're out on the road, moving the engine from place to place, or if you were near a creek. This is a 1921 28 horse Minneapolis. This is owned by Dave Schmidt out of Fond du Lac. Dave recently purchased this engine. Minneapolis built these 28s in two different ways. This is called an American, and they also built a Canadian version that had some modifications that Canada required for boilers. And then when they did that, they made the rear wheels a little heavier, a little wider. They put a different pulley system for the governor on them. So there's some difference between the American and Canadians, but this is a fine example of an American 28. This is Dave Clowers, and this is a 1913 22 horse Minneapolis. This is the engine I talked about that is a pre-1916. So when you see this go by, if you look at the crank disc, it has a solid crank disc on it. That was one of the major changes that happened. And it also has a riser piece that's decorated or is fancy underneath the governor that wasn't there on the later engines. There's other things that are very similar, the wheels, the castings. You can see that there wasn't changes there, but there was some other pretty major changes. Dave has a spark arrestor on this engine. These engines, these later engines, let's call them mid-year engines, did have more water capacity than like the early return flues. Thank you, Dave. The last engine is another one of a kind. This is a 45 horse Minneapolis single cylinder compound. This is one of 7 built and the only one to exist. To put this engine in perspective, the rear wheels are 4 foot wide, 84 inches high, and weigh about 4,000 pounds apiece. If you, as it comes through, watch your toes because it takes up the road from side to side. Minneapolis built these engines in 2 different ways. This is a single. They also built this style engine in a 45 double tandem compound, meaning 2 cylinders that were compounded. This engine comes to us from Fargo or Rolog, Minnesota, and is shown out at that show.